I had 30 seconds before the dessert spoons hit the table and the bullets hit his chest. My hand shook just enough to smear the ballpoint ink as I folded the receipt into quarters. 7 words. That's all I'd managed to scrawl in the service station between courses. They're going to kill you. Table 1. The paper felt thinner than tissue, like it might disintegrate before it reached him. Around me, the Gilded Lotus hummed with the low frequency of wealth crystal against porcelain. Muted laughter, the whisper of expensive fabric against leather booth seats. Outside, winter wind battered the floor-to-ceiling windows, rattling glass that cost more per square foot than my monthly rent. But in here, everything was warm. Too warm. Suffocating. I approached table 1 like I was walking toward my own execution. Ham Jung-hi sat with his back to the glass wall, the city glittering behind him like a throne of lights. He looked like he'd been carved from stone and dressed in vengeance. Sharp features, dark hair perfectly styled, a Tom Ford suit that cost more than my father's entire hospital bill. His hand rested on the table, fingers drumming a slow, predatory rhythm against the white linen. Beside him, she leaned in close, whispering something that made her red lips curve into a smile. Her diamond earrings caught the candlelight, throwing fractured rainbows across the tablecloth. She looked like a woman in love. She wasn't. 20 minutes ago, I'd heard her order his death. The wine vault at the Gilded Lotus wasn't really a vault. It was a temperature-controlled sanctuary in the basement, all glass walls and soft lighting that made the bottles glow like jewels. I'd been sent down to grab a 2009 Chateau Margaux for table 7, threading my way past rows of Bordeaux and Burgundy when I heard voices. Female, sharp, urgent. I froze between the Chiantis and the Brunellos, my hand still on the bottle I'd been reaching for. Table 1. By the glass wall. The voice was low, controlled, speaking with the precision of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times. And the positioning? Another woman's voice, higher, with an edge of nervousness. The sniper's already in place. Rooftop across the street. The others are positioned, 1 at the bar, 3 near the kitchen exits. My breath caught. You'll have a clean shot the moment he settles back in his seat. Dessert service. That's when his guard is lowest. What about witnesses? Handled. The lights will go first. 15 seconds of darkness. That's your window. The air in the wine vault, climate-controlled to exactly 55 degrees, suddenly felt arctic. I should have announced myself, cleared my throat, made my presence known like a professional. Instead, I stood there, heart hammering, and listened as she continued. No mistakes this time. Jung-hi doesn't get a third chance to see this coming. This wasn't a conversation. It was a confirmation, a countdown. Heels clicked against the stone floor, moving toward the stairs. I pressed myself against the wine rack, praying the shadows and bottles would hide me. Through the gaps between $1,000 vintages, I caught a glimpse of her. Tall, elegant, wearing a crimson dress that looked like it cost more than my father's monthly medication. Dark hair swept into an intricate updo, diamond earrings catching the light like warning flares. The woman currently sitting at table 1, playing the role of loving fiancée to the man she'd just arranged to have killed. She disappeared up the stairs, her perfume lingering something expensive and floral that now smelled like a funeral arrangement. I stood there for 10 seconds, 15, 20, waiting for my legs to remember how to work. When I finally climbed back up to the main floor, Chateau Margaux forgotten, my brain was sprinting through what I'd heard. I could see my father in his hospital bed, the machines keeping him alive beeping their steady rhythm. I could see the nurses who fought for him when insurance said no. I could see the bills stacked on my kitchen counter, each one a month of double shifts, a year of ramen dinners, a decade of debt. I was invisible, just a waitress, a variable no one calculated, but maybe that's exactly what made me dangerous. Welcome to the channel, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. Before we continue Carol's journey into the darkness, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss a single heartbeat of this story. Tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from? And what time is it in your part of the world? Let's dive back into the shadows together. I had 30 seconds to get back upstairs before someone noticed the Chateau Margaux was taking too long. My legs finally remembered how to move, but my hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the bottle twice climbing the narrow stone stairs. The weight of it felt wrong now, too heavy. Too fragile, like everything else in this moment that could shatter and cut. When I emerged back into the restaurant's golden glow, the world looked different. The chandeliers seemed too bright, the laughter too loud, every shadow suddenly suspicious. I forced myself to breathe normally, to keep my server smile plastered on my face as I delivered the wine to table 7. The businessman barely glanced at me as I poured, too absorbed in whatever deal he was closing to notice that the waitress's hands were trembling. I scanned the dining room with new eyes. The man at the bar nursing a whiskey, was he one of them? The 3 suited figures near the kitchen entrance, supposedly waiting for their table, were those the ones she'd mentioned? My gaze dragged back to table 1 like a magnet pulled to true north. Ham Jung-hi sat exactly as I'd left him, powerful and unsuspecting. The woman in the crimson dress, his fiancée, his executioner, was touching his arm now, laughing at something he'd said. Her diamond ring caught the light, an engagement ring. The performance was flawless. I retreated to the service station, my mind racing through impossible calculations. I could tell the manager, but he'd think I was insane. Call the police? They'd arrive in 20 minutes, maybe 30, and by then it would be over. Besides, what proof did I have? The overheard conversation of a waitress who admittedly didn't speak the languages she claimed to understand? No one would believe me, no one would listen. My hand found the order pad in my apron pocket. The pen felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I thought about my father in his hospital bed, the machines keeping him alive, the nurses who'd fought for him when the insurance companies said his treatment was too expensive. Those women had risked their jobs to do what was right. They'd seen him as a person, not a policy number. I pulled out the pad and wrote 7 words. My handwriting looked foreign, shaky. Nothing like my usual neat script on customer receipts. They're going to kill you. Table 1. The paper felt like a confession and a death sentence all at once. If I was wrong, I'd lose my job. If I was right and did nothing, I'd lose something far more valuable, the ability to look at myself in the mirror. The woman who'd coordinated that hit in the wine vault had done it so casually, like she was ordering the execution of a pest, not a human being. I folded the receipt into quarters and slipped it into my apron alongside my other orders. My section manager was signaling me table 1 wanted their dessert menu. It was time. I crossed the dining room with the dessert menus tucked under my arm and the folded receipt burning a hole in my palm. Every step felt like walking through water, my body fighting against what my mind had decided to do. The ambient noise of the restaurant's silverware on china, murmured conversations, the soft jazz from the corner piano, all of it faded to a dull roar in my ears. Ham Jung-hi looked up as I approached. His eyes were dark, unreadable, the kind of eyes that had seen things I couldn't imagine, and made decisions I'd never have to make. Up close, he was even more intimidating, all sharp angles and controlled power, like a blade kept in a very expensive sheath. Dessert menu? I managed, my voice steadier than I'd expected. The woman in red, his killer, wearing that engagement ring like a trophy she hadn't earned yet, smiled at me. The tiramisu, please. And I'll decide for myself, Jung-hi said, not looking at her. His fingers had stopped their drumming. He took the menu from me, and I let the folded receipt slip from my hand onto the table beside his whiskey glass, hidden beneath the edge of the leather portfolio. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. I saw the exact moment he noticed the paper. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between us, a current of understanding that made my stomach drop. I stepped back, already turning away, when his hand moved. Not toward the receipt, toward his phone. One quick glance down. His thumb moved across the screen. Then the lights went out. Not gradually, not flickering. Every light in the Gilded Lotus died at once, plunging the restaurant into absolute darkness. Screams erupted around me. Glass shattered. I heard the woman in red shout something sharp and furious, a command that cut through the chaos. A hand grabbed my wrist, strong, unrelenting. Jung-hi's voice was in my ear, low and deadly calm. Stay behind me. Move when I move. The world exploded. Gunfire cracked through the darkness, muzzle flashes illuminating the dining room in strobe light snapshots of horror. I saw the man from the bar with a gun raised. I saw Jung-hi shove the table over, heard the woman in red hit the floor. Another shot. Closer. Too close. The The window behind us spiderwebbed with cracks. Jung-hi pulled me down, and we were moving fast, low, using overturned tables as cover. My knees hit broken glass. Someone was screaming. The piano had stopped. More gunfire, this time from Jung-hi's direction. He'd drawn a weapon from somewhere, was returning fire with the precision of someone who'd done this before. We crashed through the kitchen doors, and suddenly there was light again, harsh, fluorescent reality. The kitchen staff had scattered. Jung-hi didn't stop, pulling me past the industrial stoves, the walk-in freezers, toward the loading dock exit. "You just saved my life," he said, not even breathing hard. "That means you're mine now. If you can't stand traitors who smile while holding a knife, hit subscribe to Stand with Carol." The loading dock door was 15 feet away when I heard footsteps pounding behind us, multiple sets, heavy boots on tile. Jung-hi spun, putting himself between me and the kitchen entrance, his gun raised. 3 men burst through the swinging doors, weapons drawn. "Go!" Jung-hi barked at me, firing twice. 1 man dropped, the other 2 scattered, using the stainless steel prep stations as cover. I ran for the exit, but a 4th man appeared from behind the walk-in freezer, blocking my path. He was massive, built like he spent his life in a gym preparing for exactly this kind of work. His gun swung toward me, and I did the only thing my panicked brain could process. I grabbed the nearest thing on the counter, a sauté pan, still on the burner, still filled with oil that had been heating for someone's midnight appetizer order. I didn't think, I just swung. The scalding oil arced through the air in a golden wave, catching him full in the face. His scream was inhuman. The gun clattered to the floor as his hands flew to his eyes, his skin already blistering, turning an angry red that would haunt my nightmares for years. I stood there frozen, the empty pan still in my hands, staring at what I'd done. Steam rose from his ruined face. The smell of burned flesh mixed with the restaurant's lingering aromas of garlic and rosemary. Jung-hi's hand on my shoulder snapped me back. "Well done," he said, like I'd just executed a perfect wine pairing instead of permanently disfiguring another human being. He grabbed the fallen gun, pressed it into my hands. "Hold this. Don't use it unless I tell you to." More gunfire erupted behind us. The 2 remaining men were advancing, using the kitchen equipment as cover, firing in controlled bursts. Jung-hi returned fire, his movements economical and precise. A line of bullet holes stitched across the stainless steel behind us. We backed toward the loading dock, Jung-hi covering our retreat. I clutched the gun he'd given me, the metal cold and foreign in my grip. My hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, from the man I'd hurt, from the reality that 10 minutes ago I'd been worried about Table 7's wine temperature and now I was holding a weapon. Jung-hi kicked the loading dock door open. Cold winter air rushed in, sharp and clean after the chaos. A black SUV sat idling in the alley, engine running. The driver's door opened, and a man in tactical gear emerged, laying down covering fire as we ran. I stumbled on the dock's metal stairs, nearly fell. Jung-hi caught me, practically threw me into the back seat of the SUV. He slid in beside me, slammed the door, and the vehicle was moving before I could process what was happening. Through the back window, I watched the Gilded Lotus recede into the distance. Smoke was rising from somewhere inside now, my entire life disappearing behind tinted glass. The SUV drove for 20 minutes through streets I didn't recognize, taking turns that seemed random until I realized we were deliberately avoiding main roads. My ears were still ringing from the gunfire. My hands still smelled like burned oil and fear. Jung-hi sat beside me in silence, checking his phone, texting someone in what looked like Korean. The tactical driver said nothing. No one asked if I was okay. No one explained where we were going. We pulled into an underground garage that required 3 separate security checkpoints. The building above us was all concrete and dark glass, the kind of architectural brutalism that screamed money and paranoia in equal measure. Jung-hi led me to a private elevator that required both a keycard and a fingerprint scan. The penthouse was exactly what I'd expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than my car, art on the walls that looked like it belonged in a museum. It was beautiful and sterile, a fortress pretending to be a home. "Sit," Jung-hi said, gesturing to the leather sofa. It wasn't a request. I sat. My uniform was torn at the knee, stained with wine and God knows what else. I looked like I'd survived a war. I suppose I had. Jung-hi poured himself a whiskey from a crystal decanter. Didn't offer me one. He stood by the window, backlit by the city lights, studying me like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "You saved my life tonight," he said finally. "Why?" "Because it was the right thing to do." The words sounded naive even as I said them. "The right thing." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Do you know who I am, Carol?" The use of my name made my blood run cold. I'd never told him my name. "I know everything about you," he continued, pulling out his phone and scrolling. "Carol Marie Smith, 26 years old. Father Robert Smith, currently at Chicago Memorial Hospital. Room 412. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 7 months of treatment so far. Medical bills totaling." He paused, meeting my eyes. $378,000. My throat closed. "How do you—" "I own the debt." He said it casually, like he was discussing the weather. "Bought it 6 months ago from the collection agency, along with 43 other accounts. It's good business. Medical debt is remarkably profitable when you know how to leverage it." The room tilted. I gripped the arm of the sofa to keep from sliding off. "So you see," Jung-hi continued, swirling his whiskey, "you didn't save my life out of nobility. You saved it because you already belonged to me. You just didn't know it yet." He took a sip, watching my reaction. "Now the question is, what am I going to do with you?" Comment, "I stand for justice if you believe people shouldn't be treated like property by those in power." I stayed in that concrete fortress for 3 days. 3 days of watching Jung-hi conduct business from his penthouse like a king holding court. Men in expensive suits coming and going with briefcases and worried expressions. 3 days of sleeping in a guest room that was nicer than my entire apartment, wearing clothes that appeared in my size without me asking. 3 days of trying not to think about the fact that I was a prisoner dressed in silk. On the morning of the 4th day, Jung-hi's phone rang. He answered in Korean, his face hardening with each passing second. When he hung up, he looked at me with something that might have been respect if it weren't mixed with such cold calculation. "Your father's insulin shipment arrived today," he said. "You had it delivered to my address." I had. I'd called the hospital from Jung-hi's landline, redirected the medication because I didn't know when or if I'd be going home. My father needed his insulin every 12 hours. The cancer was killing him, but diabetes would finish the job faster if he missed doses. "It's in the kitchen," Jung-hi continued. "My people checked it. Standard medical packaging, proper refrigeration requirements, everything legitimate." He paused. "Almost everything." The tactical team that had been stationed throughout the penthouse suddenly mobilized, moving with the practiced efficiency of men who'd trained for exactly this scenario. Jung-hi grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a reinforced door I'd never seen opened. "What's happening?" I demanded. "They tracked you," he said, pushing me into what looked like a panic room. Steel walls, monitors showing every angle of the penthouse, enough supplies to survive a siege. "There's a GPS tracker in your father's insulin vials, microscopic, hidden in the packaging. Someone knew you'd have it delivered wherever you were hiding." The implications hit me like a physical blow. "My father is fine. The hospital doesn't know. But whoever planted that tracker does, and they're coming." Through the monitors, I watched the elevator indicators light up, all 3 of them, ascending simultaneously. Jung-hi's men took positions throughout the penthouse, weapons ready. He sealed the panic room door, the locks engaging with a heavy thunk. "How many?" I whispered, staring at the screens. "At least 12. He was checking his own weapon, calm as someone preparing for a business meeting. "They cut the building's security, used an override code on the elevators. Professional, coordinated." He glanced at me. "Your fiancée's work, probably. She doesn't give up easily." "She's not my—" I started, then realized he meant Jung-hi's fiancée. The woman in red who'd ordered his execution. The woman who was now sending an army to finish what the restaurant ambush had started. The elevator doors opened on the monitors. Men poured out, tactical gear, automatic weapons. They moved through the penthouse like a well-oiled machine, clearing rooms, searching for us. We survived the safe house breach because Jung-hi had planned for betrayal the way most people plan for retirement. The panic room had a secondary exit that led to an underground tunnel, then to another vehicle, another safe house, another temporary fortress in this endless game of survival chess. This one was different, smaller. A warehouse converted into living quarters on the industrial edge of the city, where nobody asked questions and security cameras had learned to look the other way. "You can't keep running," Jung-hi said on our second night there. "Eventually they'll find us again. Next time, you need to be able to protect yourself." That's how I found myself in the warehouse's makeshift shooting range at 2 a.m, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of gun oil and concrete thick in the air. Jung-hi stood behind me, adjusting my stance, his hands impersonal and efficient as he positioned my arms. "Feet shoulder-width apart, bend your knees slightly. The gun is an extension of your body, not a separate entity." The weapon felt wrong in my hands, too heavy, too final. I thought about the man in the kitchen, his face ruined by hot oil, and wondered how many more people I'd have to hurt before this was over. "Focus," Jung-hi said, reading my hesitation. "The target downrange won't care about your moral crisis. Shoot." I squeezed the trigger. The recoil shocked me, sent the barrel up and to the right. The bullet pinged off the concrete wall somewhere behind the paper target. Again. We worked through 2 magazines, then 3. My ears rang despite the protection. My arms ached from holding the stance. But slowly, impossibly, I started hitting the target. Not the center, not even close to where Jung-hi's shots clustered in tight, professional groupings, but I was hitting it. "Better," he said. And something in his voice had shifted from clinical instructor to something almost warm. "You're learning." "I'm learning to kill people," I corrected, lowering the gun. My hands were shaking again, but this time from exhaustion, not fear. Jung-hi took the weapon from me, engaged the safety, set it down. We stood there in the harsh fluorescent light, and for the first time since the restaurant, he looked at me like I was a person, instead of an asset to be protected or a debt to be collected. "You're learning to survive," he said quietly. "In my world, they're the same thing." His hand came up, brushed a strand of hair back from my face. The gesture was gentle, startling in its tenderness from a man I'd only ever seen deal in violence and cold calculation. "You didn't have to warn me that night," he continued. "You could have let me die, walked away from everything, the debt, the danger, all of it." "I couldn't," I whispered. "I know." He stepped closer. "That's what makes you dangerous. Like this video, if you believe everyone deserves the chance to fight back against a broken system." The plan was insane. I told Jung-hi this repeatedly over the 3 days it took to prepare. But he had that look in his eyes, the one that said he'd already calculated every variable and decided the odds were acceptable. "They expect me to hide," he explained, spreading surveillance photos across the warehouse table. "They expect me to run, to consolidate power, to wait them out. They don't expect me to walk into their headquarters and burn it down from the inside." "You're not walking in," I corrected. "I am." The compound belonged to Jung-hi's half-brother Juno, a sprawling estate in the suburbs that looked like old money but was built on very new blood. Juno had been the one funding the hit, working with the woman in red Carolina to eliminate Jung-hi and take control of the organization. Jung-hi had confirmed this through his own sources, through intercepted communications, and the bodies that kept showing up with Juno's signature brutality. The infiltration relied on one critical fact. They were looking for me. The waitress who'd saved Jung-hi's life, the variable they hadn't accounted for. Juno wanted me found, wanted to know what I knew, who I'd told, what evidence I might have gathered. So we'd give them exactly what they wanted. Jung-hi's men staged my capture beautifully. A traffic stop on a road they knew Juno's people monitored. A deliberate struggle. Me, screaming and fighting as they dragged me from a car, my face just visible enough for the surveillance cameras. Within 6 hours, Juno's team had intercepted the transport, killed Jung-hi's men actors who'd been paid enough to disappear permanently, and taken me to the estate. They threw me in a basement room that smelled like mildew and old fear. The concrete walls were stained with things I didn't want to identify. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly, casting shadows that moved like living things. Juno came himself to interrogate me. He looked like Jung-hi's reflection in a funhouse mirror, similar features but twisted, meaner, everything sharp, where Jung-hi was controlled. He smiled like a man who enjoyed his work too much. "The waitress," he said, circling me where I sat zip-tied to a metal chair. "You cost me a lot of money at that restaurant. A lot of planning. I did what Jung-hi had coached me to do. I broke easily. I cried, begged, told them Jung-hi was hiding in a penthouse across town, gave them the address of an empty building Jung-hi's team had prepared. I mentioned the security codes, the number of guards, every detail designed to be believable because it was almost true. "Please," I sobbed, selling it. "Just let me go. I don't know anything else. I just want to see my father." Juno studied me for a long moment, then smiled. "You know what? I believe you." He left me in that basement, and I waited in the dark, counting down the minutes until the real plan began. They kept me in that basement for 2 days. Fed me once, gave me water twice. Let me believe I'd actually fooled them. Through the thin walls, I could hear activity above people moving with purpose, vehicles arriving and departing, the hum of an organization preparing for something big. On the 3rd day, they came for me. Not to kill me, but to clean me up. A woman with cold hands and expensive perfume scrubbed the grime from my skin, dressed me in a silk slip dress the color of champagne, styled my hair like I was attending a gala instead of my own execution. "The boss wants you presentable," she said, applying lipstick to my mouth with clinical precision. "You're going to a wedding." They brought me upstairs in handcuffs, through halls decorated with white roses and crystal. The estate had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale if fairy tales were written by people who understood that true evil always dressed beautifully. The ceremony was being held in the garden. Rows of white chairs filled with people who looked like they'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. At the altar stood Juno in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my father's entire medical treatment, and beside him, radiant in white lace and lies, stood Carolina. She saw me being led to a seat in the front row and smiled. That same smile from the restaurant, the one that hid murder behind perfect teeth. "Our special guest," Juno announced to the crowd, gesturing at me. "The woman who thought she could protect my brother from justice. She'll witness what happens to traitors in our family." I kept my face blank, terrified, exactly what they expected. Inside, I was counting. Jung-hi had said 20 minutes after I was moved from the basement. 20 minutes for his team to breach the perimeter, for everything we'd planned to fall into place. The officiant began the ceremony. Carolina's hands trembled slightly as Juno slipped the ring onto her finger, not from emotion, but from anticipation. This wedding was a coronation. With Jung-hi's death confirmed and me as their trophy prisoner, they'd won. Except Jung-hi wasn't dead. The explosions came first, controlled detonations at 3 points around the estate's perimeter, disabling their security systems and creating chaos. Then the gunfire started, Jung-hi's team moving through the compound with surgical precision. The guests screamed, scattering like birds. Juno's guards rushed toward the gunfire, leaving the garden exposed, and then Jung-hi himself appeared at the garden's entrance, immaculate in black tactical gear, a gun in each hand. "Did I miss the vows?" he asked, his voice carrying across the lawn. Carolina's face drained of color. Juno reached for his weapon, but I was faster. The small blade Jung-hi had hidden in my dress tucked against my spine where their search had been too modest to find was in my hand. I cut through the zip ties, dove behind a row of chairs as bullets started flying. Jung-hi moved through the garden like death in designer clothing, his shots precise and devastating. I saw Juno take cover behind the altar, saw Carolina running for the house. The training Jung-hi had drilled into me took over. I grabbed a fallen guard's weapon, checked the magazine, moved. If you're not siding with bullies like Carolina and Juno, subscribe now to see how Carol ends their reign. 1 year later, I stood in a penthouse that actually felt like home, not a fortress. Not a safe house, but a place where I could breathe without counting exits and checking shadows. My father sat in the living room, color back in his cheeks, laughing at something on the television. The cancer was in remission. The doctors called it a miracle. I called it $378,000 worth of debt that no longer existed, along with the best oncologist's money could buy, and Jung-hi's refusal to accept any outcome except survival. "Carol," my father called, "you're going to be late." I checked my reflection one last time. The woman staring back at me looked nothing like the terrified waitress who'd hidden in a wine vault, listening to murder being planned in foreign languages. This woman wore confidence like armor, a black dress that cost more than a month's rent at my old apartment, and knew exactly how many rounds were in the gun holstered beneath her jacket. The garden wedding had ended exactly as Jung-hi had planned. Juno had died trying to escape through the estate's back entrance, caught between Jung-hi's team and his own collapsing empire. Carolina had made it further all the way to the driveway, in fact, before I'd put 2 bullets in her back. Jung-hi had given me the choice, and I'd taken it without hesitation. Some betrayals were too complete to forgive. The organization had fractured after that, Jung-hi consolidating power while eliminating the elements that had made assassination attempts feel like quarterly business reviews. He'd restructured everything, brought in new leadership, made it clear that the old ways, the casual violence, the treating of people as disposable assets were finished. I'd been part of that restructuring. Not as property, not as a debt holder, as a partner. Miss Smith? Jung-hi's driver greeted me at the car. He held the door with the same respect he showed Jung-hi. It had taken months for me to get used to that, the way people looked at me now, like I was someone who mattered instead of someone who brought their wine. Jung-hi was waiting at the restaurant, not the Gilded Lotus, which had closed permanently after that night, but a new place he'd invested in. Legitimate business, he'd insisted, though I suspected his definition of legitimate had more flexibility than most people's. He stood when I entered, and something in his expression softened. We'd never defined what we were to each other. Partners seemed too clinical, lovers too simple. We were 2 people who'd saved each other's lives, and decided that was a better foundation than most relationships started with. "You look beautiful," he said, pulling out my chair. "You look dangerous," I replied, and he laughed. Outside, the city glittered with possibility. Somewhere out there, a waitress was serving tables, invisible to the wealthy patrons who never looked twice. Maybe she'd stay invisible. Maybe she'd overhear something she shouldn't and have to make an impossible choice. I hoped, if that moment came, she'd choose to be brave. I hoped she'd choose to survive.